I'm Janeane, and this is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. It is my pleasure to welcome to this week's show Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick and co-director Brian Shackelford. How are you?
How are you?
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Well, as I said, congratulations on your film. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. It definitely is. Distribution and being able to share it with the audience that we wanted to share it with, which actually was not our goal
initially.
Yeah. It was really more about getting the story told.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those things where when the story first came across, I admit I was very skeptical about it because we had just done another documentary. And documentary filmmaking involves so much time. But once I read the blog post that Joyce shared with me, I wanted to be a part of telling this story because I was so amazed that some of these stories hadn't been told already. And then, like everything with a documentary, once you start to tell a documentary, you go in with the story you plan to tell, but then the story evolves into something so much bigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Joyce, you found this story on a blog post?
Actually, no, that's not how it happened. The whole story behind the story is a very personal one, because Dr. Robinson, who you saw featured in the film, I grew up across the street from him. We are all lived in the same neighborhood in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay.
And as a child, I would see him in his scrubs going to work, and I used to babysit his daughter, who actually is a producer on the film.
That's great.
And yes, Rebecca. Yes, that's how the story started. Because Rebecca reached out to me via social media, Facebook, back in 2011, I think, or 2012.
Yeah.
And I didn't even recognize her because I didn't see a photo. She had gotten married, so she had a different name. So when she said, "Hi, Joyce, how are you?" I'm like, "Who is this person?"
Who are you?
That was when Facebook was really kind of still sketchy and people were making up names and everything. So I didn't know who she was. And then when she says, "You remember me as Becky Boo," and I'm like, "Oh my God, you
Becky Boo?
Girl I used to babysit." So we jumped on a phone call and it was great having a reunion. So then she said that her father had been looking at my Facebook page, watching the things that I've been doing, and found out that I was a filmmaker because, you know, once I grew up, everyone moved away. You know, you go to college and you move away. And I came to California to go to college. So, you know, relationships, they change, but we always are neighbors. So once I spoke with Dr. Robinson, then they said to read his blog, which I did, which is called Uriah's Chronicles. And that is when I really saw the importance of the documentary, or
telling the story.
Homer G. Phillips Hospital, but also just about the stories that he told. Because if you do get an opportunity, Janeane, to read those books, they read like a much, I hate this.
Wait, you're freezing a little bit. For some reason, your internet's freezing. I don't know if it's me or you.
Grey's Anatomy.
Wait, can you back up a second? Because you're frozen.
Gives you a more of a backstory. Oh, that's okay.
Wait,
yeah,
okay.
I know that. Yeah,
Wait, you said if you get a chance, hold on.
To read Uriah's Chronicles, Dr. Robinson's Chronicles, it gives you a backstory as to why the Homer G. Phillips is so important. And it actually reads like that decade's version of Grey's Anatomy. It just has everything from love stories to crime, hate, everything, all in his blog. And I was like, this is amazing. So once we got that decided upon, him and I would go back and forth over phone calls. And I actually asked him initially, it was the very first thing that came out of my mouth. I said, "Dr. Robinson, you know, why me? Why would you ask me to tell this story? Because you could have hired any film crew, you know."
What do you say?
He said, because I know you. And but at the time he still didn't know. I mean, he saw some of my work, but you know how it is. I mean,
he got a sense about you.
I'm sorry.
He had a sense about you.
Yes, evidently. And he says, "I remember you as a child being, you know, not like the other kids, like everyone was playing." And I played too. But he said, "You were always asking me questions about medicine and always in my medical books. So I always considered you to be a little more intelligent." And I'm like, okay. But regardless of that, That is how it actually got started. So Brian, we kind of have this good cop, bad cop relationship where, you know, I'm the person that listens to everybody and they have a sad story or they this. I'm like, oh, you know, and he's like, okay, no, we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
Right. So when I brought the story to him, he was really a good person to vet the whole situation, because he goes, you know what, that's great. Dr. Robinson is cool. And I know you have a personal connection, but how do I know what if the story's worth it? So he got on the phone with Dr. Robinson. Yeah. And once he spoke with him and he definitely answered all those questions, then that's when it somewhat took off. Now, we were working on another documentary at the time, and that one was very involved, which was Sunshine Noodles and Me. So we were traveling, and we were in Malaysia and Tokyo and all this stuff because that film took place in those places. So as soon as we got back, and we had to deal with festivals for that, and then it ended up on what, you know how it is, you work on a project and then it's your baby and you push it off.
Yes.
Move on. Once Sunshine Noodles, we got it on PBS, and we were like, okay, great, now it's gone. Now we can focus. So then that's when it started.
Right. By the way, I love how nonchalant you are. Oh, we got it on PBS.
Oh no, you know, and I'm sorry. I don't mean it that way. You know, Janeane, being in California, you're probably familiar with the KLCS.
Yes.
Are you familiar? Yeah. I used to work there. Okay. As a promotional producer, and also I worked there in the studio. I started off as a broadcast assistant, working camera, setting lights, doing everything, working in master control. So when I got the job to move forward, you know, it was a place that I always keep, you know, to my heart. So anyway, they are a PBS affiliate, and you know, once KCET moved, or they kind of shut down somewhat, then that became the main hub. Yeah. So the general manager there, she ran into me. We ran into one another, and she says, "Oh my God, Joyce, you know, what have you been up to?" And I told her we just finished this documentary. So she said, "Send it to me. Let me check it out." And she's like, "We have to have this." So that's how I got on PBS.
Great. Yeah. And so, Brian, what has it been like for you on this ride, creating this documentary?
It's actually it's funny because I was just thinking, listening to Joyce's story. And it kind of will encapsulate your question is with Dr. Robinson saying, "I trust you to tell the story." It's because this story is so personal to so many of the people. One of the big things, and I think one of the things that gives this story such a heart, is that I was just saying this the other day, is that the story, we are just the vessels that were used to add visuals and tell the story, but it's actually giving a voice to the people who live this incredible life at this hospital and during this time, and the people of the Ville and that connection. And I still, when I think back to sitting in those rooms and listening to those stories, people, you can tell when a person is talking to you, and then you can tell when they're talking to you and they leave and they go someplace else.
Yes.
Every one of these people, when they were recounting the stories, they weren't just telling you, they were literally going back and reliving these moments. And you could just tell how much it meant to them. You could see the emotions come up. There's so much footage that we had to cut out. I think we lost over 8 hours of footage.
We had over 100 interviews. I mean, it was so much. We just couldn't include everyone. And every avenue that we kept thinking, you know, even once we gathered everything, it was like, okay, how do we tell the story? So it just really, really overwhelmed me for a moment, because which is why it kind of took a bit to get started, because I didn't know what angle to take it from. And then finally I just said, you know what, just start from the beginning. And everyone we spoke with, I always had a set of questions. And one of my first questions was, do you know who Homer G. Phillips is? And you would have been surprised of how many people, even the doctors that worked there were some that didn't know who he was. They knew a little bit. They were like, oh, he was an attorney. But they had no idea that the reason, you know, sometimes things are named after people because they make a huge donation or something like that. But they really had no idea, which you probably saw in the film, was why they named it after him and why it was so important to name it after him. And I wanted to ask you a question of what were your thoughts on the film? If you don't mind me asking.
It's very relatable to what's going on now, to some, you know, which is why I wanted to, you know, also chat with you. What's fascinating, though, I want to say, is you both sound like two researchers where you're looking for the themes of what's going to be the most powerful, and you're open to what emerges, which makes a great documentary. And that you had to go through a lot of editing to decide which ones to feature.
Yeah.
The fact that we're both still sitting here because we almost killed each other. No, it's just so much.
A lot.
Yeah,
we still to this day have a picture that we always look up of our wall, because we had the whole project and we broke it down into decades up on the wall and post-it notes. But it's also a good thing to do because you can look at that and it saves time, because you can do a lot of visual editing instead of actual sitting down and cutting, and you also start to see similarities and trends and differences, and finding things that work, and then also things that don't work completely stand out. But it's still so much to go through. But I think one of the things that I kept thinking was, how do you tell the story of this long of a period of time, but also without boring people, without just
we wanted to be cinematic,
talking heads and then just not old photos. So we found reenactments, but I think the biggest thing was kind of asking everybody, the fact that everybody was asked a similar question. I was able to do this interweaving thing in editing where everybody is commenting on the same thing at the same time.
And sort of telling the story
and it adds
together.
so much more weight. Now, I will tell you, there's so many times at night I was staring at the wall thinking, why did I ever start this? Because once you start doing it, you got to carry that all the way through. But I think it gives the film a heart to it. And also the fact that everybody is commenting on what happened, positive and negative. And that was the hardest thing also, is to take yourself out of the story and present everybody's view and not give your own personal opinion, which is the hardest thing to do with documentary filmmaking, period. But I love the fact that we've had people that think it's a great idea that the facility is now a senior living facility. And some people that think the hospital should have never been torn down and refuse to even go into that building. That it was such an important place, and it garners so much emotion in these people even to this day. And to see, like you're saying, the same issue still affecting us even now.
Yes.
You're
both a huge inspiration for young filmmakers in that you have a lot to teach. Keep that in mind about the process, about getting an idea, of the creative ways of editing, about boiling a lot of content down to a very important message. Keep that in mind.
It was definitely, when Brian was saying, like, when we broke it down for each decade, not only once you got into each decade, then we had to go through that decade and decide what was most important. But there were a lot of sacrifices, like you said, even for, with Dr. Robinson, Rebecca, myself, we all kind of had health issues that happened it was just a lot of things that were going on. But it is a testament to filmmaking and how much we love it, because no matter what was going on in our lives, that was the main thing. It's like, we got to get this movie done, regardless of everything else that's happening. This movie has to be completed.
It kept you going.
Yes, it became paramount. And aside from, because we were still traveling on weekends to film and come back and working our regular jobs, because we didn't get paid to do this. We had everybody reached into their pockets, and everything that we had, we just put into the film.
It was like we had a crowdsourced funding that we all worked on very, diligently, and that garnered us some funds. But because that was kind of the thing when we were starting the project, it was like, well, is there going to be money, to put into this? And when there was no money, and it wasn't by the fault of anyone being stubborn or stingy. It's just that, Dr. Robinson had his own personal things he was doing. So regardless, once we got that funding, that started the process, but then we still had to continue. So like Brian was saying, thank goodness we had our own incomes. So we would, take money, and put into it ourselves. And I just know there's so many times, Janeane, where like some of the photos that weren't really public photos that you could just pull off the internet, they were actually specifically for that when they had the riots during the closing. We had to get those from the St. Louis Mercantile, and they weren't cheap. So when I called to ask for these photos, because they were high resolution and all of that, we had to pay for that, and we didn't have the money. I had to go like, well, I guess I have to buy it because I have to have these photos. So, and it really didn't feel like it was a bad thing to do. I just did it, I thought, well, because if I don't, it's not going to happen. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is, listening to both you saying there was no funding for this project, but you had to make it. made such an incredible project. There's a difference between, oh, we have all this money, and it's so different when you don't have the money, but you have the passion and the dedication, and you're so driven, you're going to make one heck of a film.
Thank you.
That's true. There is when you don't have money, you get very creative.
Yes.
You get very creative. And that's one thing that I always say, you hope you don't lose, because when the money comes in, there's still these creative ways of storytelling that you want to hold on to, because the money should enhance, not replace.
That's right.
And that's what it often does. And then also, I think we're very fortunate that we can our backgrounds became very
many hats.
Yeah, significant in what we're able to do. The fact that I was able to go and shoot. If we had to hire a DP or an editor for every time we went into editing, it'd be impossible
it would have cost more
and do that. So we wore a lot of hats. We were carrying our own equipment. We pulled in PAs from St. Louis to help us, which was
when we got
really
down
great.
to like the last, I would say, I don't know, like maybe half of our shoots, but initially I was a PA, I was a grip, I was the person picking up the equipment. I would fly in to St. Louis before everyone else, because actually Brian was the main cinematographer, and we had another friend who worked with us on Sunshine Needles and me, Ken Montgomery. So Ken flew in. They would fly in on the weekend, and I would already be there getting all the equipment, and then I was running around town getting interviews. I was production coordinator, so I had to set up all the interviews. I was the person being hung up on, because I would call people and they would go like, I don't want to work with you.
You were customer service.
It was hilarious. And one of the main doctors that you saw in the documentary, Dr. Will Ross, an amazing physician. He was the hardest person. When I called him, he's like, what do you want? But he turned out, when he finally, once we interviewed him, and he has been one of our biggest advocates. He goes, I love you guys, but I think it's that having that, although I've never been a news reporter, I have that kind of drive where you can say no to me, you can call me all kinds of names, I'm still going to come back to you. Because when I did my other documentary on Mary Fields, the Stagecoach Mary, oh my God, we had a situation where one of the main interviews, the son of back during that time, they used the N-word to describe people.
Oh, come on.
And it was a regular thing.
Really?
So when we went to go get this interview, the son said, well, it's great that you're coming to interview my dad about Mary. And my camera guy was taking the equipment out the car, and he said he just was thinking, oh God, please, I hope Joyce doesn't go off. And I just said, you know what? I need this so bad, because this man was the last living person to see Mary Fields alive, and she died in the early 1900s, and he was already almost 100. I said, I have to get this interview. He can call me anything he wants. I'm getting in that room. And that's the same attitude I had regarding this film, because from the nurses, they were the same way, but not mean to me, but they were very, as you saw, they're like one amoeba. They're like one cell. Right. So if you win one, you win them all. And they really gave me a hard time. But once we won them over, they've been some of our biggest advocates as well.
So where can people see this film?
The film is on Vudu, Fandango, Amazon. Now on Amazon Prime, I think it's going to be on Amazon Instant. It just hasn't. When you click on it, it's not there yet. But you can order the DVD from Amazon Prime. I believe it's at Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart. But instantaneously, it's on Vudu. It's a
Vudu,
iTunes,
Google Play, Vimeo.
iTunes.
I think those are all the services that it's available at right now. Because you said Fandango.
Fandango too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any last bit of information you want people to know about the film?
Yes, and then Brian will take over from there. The reason why we talked about the COVID-19, why we thought it held so much, of a meaningful, connection, is because we are still, as African Americans, going through the exact same thing. And that's, I think, is so sad. It's like, years have passed, decades have passed, and we're still at the end or the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to healthcare. And, we're so glad to get this documentary out, because Dr. Robinson, that is what he said. He said that, Homer G. Phillips was the best time in his life. And that's because during that time, medicine, Black excellence was at its best. And we want people to see this so that Black people, brown people, white people, whomever, can look at African Americans and see that we aren't just people walking down the street with our pants hanging down. I mean, there's a lot of Black people that have done a lot of amazing things for
They sure
U.S.
have.
history. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
I
about you,
think
Brian?
that's what I would add to it. It's this one phrase that was spoken to me at a film festival. I would used to always say, I'm so glad we were able to get this story out, because I think it's such an important part of American history, African American history, that would have been swept under the rug if we didn't tell it. And I was corrected from a viewer who watched this film, and he said, this film isn't a part of American history. Everybody needs to see this. So
Yes.
it's really, moved me to that point, and I hope it's inspirational to a lot of young Black doctors that are sometimes the only ones in their class looking around wondering, do I fit in?
Mm-hmm.
We had a student when we screened at Washington University came and told us that he was considering dropping out because people don't understand how hard it is to be the only one going through what you're going through, but to see what they went through and how hard they had it, it gave him what he needed to keep going.
I love
That's
that.
all I hope the film can do.
That's amazing. What's the website for the film?
It's thecolormedicine.com, all one word.
Okay. All right. I want to thank both of you for calling in. This has been amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having
wanting
us.
to speak with
My
us.
pleasure.
And thank
My
you for
pleasure.
having us on your show. It's
What an
amazing.
accomplishment. What an
Thank you.
accomplishment. What a dedication and a passion. It's great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
Thank
so
you so much.
much.
Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, hopefully.
Sounds good. All right.
All
Be
right.
well.
Have a good one.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.